So the Bayeux Tapestry is a piece unlike anything we've seen so far in technique and also in storytelling, which I will get to in a second. So I think with this one, we'll start off like we have with the others with context. So the picture on the far left of the slide is just giving you kind of a geographic setup of the story. And the tapestry itself is going to be telling the story of the beginnings of the preparation for all the events that lead up to ultimately the Battle of Hastings. And the Battle of Hastings is between the Anglo-Saxons, which you want to consider as England, and the Normans, which would be today like the French. So the entire context has to begin with that. This is a battle between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans, and it all kind of comes to the end here at the Battle of Hastings, when ultimately the Normans defeat the Anglo-Saxons and defeat the English. So I put up here our patron, Bishop Odo, because he's going to show up in the image. Matilda, who is the potential artist in terms of a female artist, and a group of women perhaps working with her, which is kind of a reflection of the kind of art it is, which I'll talk about at the end. And another term that I'd like you to know is secular. And secular just means it's not religious in focus. Secular means it is a non-religious art piece, which is a bit unusual for us for this time period because we are just like full on into religious art during this time. The image in the center is of people just looking at the tapestry, so you can kind of get a sense of its size. And then on the right-hand side is the Bayeux Cathedral, where the tapestry was located. So let's start off still in context with a who's who of the story. So on the Anglo-Saxon side, you are going to start off with Edward the Confessor. He is the King of England in the beginning of the story. And at the beginning, he dies. So he's not in the story that long. So he dies, and the issue comes up with who's going to become King of England. So you have two people then who believe they have a right to the throne. One is Harold, and he's at the top there. He actually becomes the king after Edward the Confessor dies. So Harold is the King of England, and he's from England, so he's an Anglo-Saxon on the Anglo-Saxon side. Then on the other side, just across the English Channel, you have William the Conqueror. And William the Conqueror is the Duke of Normandy, and he wants to rule England. He wants the crown for himself. Oops, it says for himself, but for himself. So he decides to lead the Normans in an invasion of the English and to attack them so that he can take the crown from Harold and become the king. So that is ultimately the story of the tapestry. Now, the tapestry itself, again, staying with the context part of it, Bishop Odo, who I mentioned at the beginning, he is actually a Norman himself. He is not only a Norman, but he is the half brother of William the Conqueror, who wants to be king and who's leading this attack. So the tapestry being, sponsored by William the Conqueror's half brother, and really from by an artist, Matilda, this woman who happens to be also Bishop Odo's wife. It is really coming from a Norman perspective. It is told with a bias to the Normans, and usually isn't that always the way that history is told by the people who are victorious. So you have that Norman perspective overall, and that's something just to keep in mind with that. The really important part of context, and you should star this part, is that this is a contemporary retelling of the story. And all that means is that this is a story that isn't cemented in art hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years after the events take place. This is a story that takes place and then maybe no more than a few decades later or within the next generation, the story is told. So people consider it a very accurate and real depiction, even though it is biased to the Normans. It's still giving us a really good, honest, accurate depiction of some of the lifestyle, like the weaponry, what people wore, and just kind of how soldiers live their lives. So that part is incredibly accurate and realistic. So that's something else just to know. Now, College Board has required you to know two particular images. Although once you've seen one of the fragments of the Bayeux Tapestry, all of the fragments look very similar. There's a very particular way that the piece is put together. So let's go ahead and move now up to content. And let's give some just basics. So first of all, it is a continuous narrative. It is a kind of scroll of fabric. In fact, it is wool thread embroidered on linen background. And it is 230 feet long. And the scene, the tapestry itself, is 20 inches tall. In total, it has 75 individual scenes in this continuous narrative. So that's another thing that's very important, just to know the basics. And it's also separated into three different segments, as you can see in front of you. It has a main middle segment where the images are mostly located, the narrative is being told, and also there is Latin inscription, which you can see more in this image. So in the middle, it's all of the visuals. And it also has Latin, just in case you can read and you want to read what's actually going on. So you could translate all that Latin and it would be telling you, hey, the soldiers are having their first meal. They're sitting together at a table, baking bread and roasting meat. And, Bishop Odo is there blessing the meal. So that's really what's going on in the middle section, Latin and the visual story. And then on the top border and on the bottom border, you typically will have animals, sometimes composite figures. And the animals might be representing fables, like part of fable telling, where animals are representing certain qualities or characteristics or stories that might teach you a lesson. Also, the animals could represent different qualities that the artists want to display and connect to the people in the scenes. And sometimes in those top and bottom borders, you might have part of the storytelling kind of spill out over into those borders. So it really just depends on the scene. So if I go back to the cavalry attack, you can see on the bottom border, since we're having an actual battle scene here, that some of the dead soldiers have spilled out onto the bottom border and the animals have been replaced by those soldiers. So it really just depends on what scene is being shown with that. So while we're here in this one, let's just talk about this particular image. This is the cavalry attack. Gives you a great indication that the Normans, who are on the horses, are leading a battle strategy that is basically horse driven for the most part. They attack and fight their wars mostly on horseback. So that's what it means by cavalry attack. You can see the horses there. You see the soldiers and their weapons, axes, spears. You see their shields. And what I love is that the great pattern work on the clothing of the soldiers, it is a reference to like the chain mail, the kind kind of like the armor and the protective gear that the soldiers would wear during this time to protect them from all the stabby, sharp instruments of war that they would use. So that's something else that is really interestingly presented by the artist in wool. And also then the helmets are very particular to the time, where they wear these like cone-shaped helmets with little flaps of metal that would cover their noses. So you see the contemporary, accurate depiction of weapons, of clothing items for the soldiers, and also how they would wage their war with this cavalry versus being on foot. So again, the Normans are on the horses, the Anglo-Saxons are standing. And obviously it is a violent and bloody war. You notice the guy in the lower border on the very far right, he has been decapitated. And I hope in your head you're thinking of, that kind of reminds me of the Standard of Ur with the scenes of war, because it totally reminds me of that. And it really connects in many ways. So that is the cavalry scene. And again, with that link to the Standard of Ur, we're going back in this time period, and we're in Romanesque art. We're going back to this flattened out, kind of cookie cutter cut out people. Everybody kind of looks the same depiction. And again, that's just typical of the Middle Ages, be it Christian art or be it even secular art like this. So the other scene they want you to know, and we're still in content, is this first meal scene. So I kind of like that they're giving you a battle scene, and then they're also giving you a scene that's showing the soldiers on a time when they're not fighting. And other scenes in the Bayeux Tapestry, they're showing like making ships, building all of the temporary housing, and then here, gathered together and making meals, preparing their food in fires. This is William with Bishop Odo. Odo is blessing the meal, and they are showing what life would be like for soldiers during this time. There's no realism really of space or perspective. Everyone's flat, everyone's looking the same, but it is clear what is going on. So that is the first meal, and again, the Latin that would be in there that you see around the heads of the soldiers, that would all be a descriptor of this particular scene. And here's just a close-up so you can see it. Now on this page, I defined what a tapestry is, and that is, since it's called the Bayeux Tapestry, I would want you to have that. You can put that in content or context. I have no preference, honestly. But the definition was there, so I'll let you take a look at that and write that down for your notes. So let me just think here. Jumping down, if you don't mind, to context for a moment. Some people believe that the tapestry was inspired by and adapted from an illuminated manuscript, a book with paintings that was telling the same story. And that perhaps Bishop Odo wanted an art piece to place and display in his cathedral, because Bishop Odo was the bishop of the Bayeux Cathedral. And so perhaps he commissioned his wife Matilda then to make this tapestry, and they used illuminated manuscript images to be the guiding force behind then the images on the tapestry. And again, ultimately, William wins, and Harold is killed at the end of the battle, and the end part of the tapestry is missing, but we think that was the coronation of William at the end that you actually do not see. And so ultimately, William becomes the first Norman king of England. And again, this being a great contemporary retelling of that event. So for function here, it is definitely a narrative, and again, a continuous narration. because of the multiple times you see William and even Bishop Odo and Harold. So a continuous narration. It is also a great power image displaying the power of the Normans over the Anglo-Saxons. And it is also a great historical document, especially being made so closely to the time when the event actually occurred. The other thing I'd like to do for formal qualities then, if we're moving on to that, you could do space, where that middle space is there to tell that very clear narrative. And in fact, I know you don't see it, but the scenes are separated. I don't think any of these do show that. Nope. The scenes are separated with vertical divides, like trees might divide each individual scene from each other. So it is told as a clear and defined story, almost like it has chapters, even though it's a continuous scrolling out 200 some foot long tapestry. So that's what I would use. And related art pieces, I've mentioned one, which is the Standard of Ur, but an even better connector, and I don't know if you were thinking of it, an even better connector would be the Column of Trajan, that marble spiraling column telling the story of the Romans versus the Dacians, a complete campaign, telling that story in marble versus telling a complete campaign and story here in wool and linen.